as Laura. Vayanam namaskritna. Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya.
Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya.
Om namo bhagavate vasudevaya.
Om namo bhagavate
Om namo
vasudevaya.
bhagavate vasudevaya. Narayanam namaskritya naram sarva naram devim saraswati yasam tato jayam udirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan, unto Nar Narayan Rishi, the supremest human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and unto Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta Presh Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavat Sevaya Bhagavat Gita Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. By regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed, and loving service unto the personality of Godhead, who is praised with transcendental songs, is established as an irrevocable fact. So we're in the Srimad Bhagavatam, second canto, the Cosmic Manifestation, chapter 9, text 4. Atma
Atma-tattva
Vishuddhyartam
Vishuddhyartam
Yad Aha
Yadaha
Gavanritam
Bhagavanritam
Ramane
Ramane
Darshayan
Darshayan
Rupam Avyalika
Avyalika
Rataditaha Atma Tattva Vishuddhyartam
Atma-tattva Vishuddhyartam
Yad Aha Bhagavanritam
Yadaha Bhagavanritam
Ramane Darshayan Rupam
Brahmane Darshayan Rupam
Avyalika Ratadritaha
Avyalika Rataditaha
Atma Tattva Vishuddhyartam
Atma-tattva Vishuddhyartam
Yadaha Bhagavanritam
Yadaha Bhagavanritam
Ramane Darshayan Rupam
Brahmane Darshayan Rupam
Avyalika Ratadritaha.
Avyalika Rataditaha.
Would anybody else like to?
Atma-tattva Vishuddhyartam
Atma-tattva Vishuddhyartam
Yadaha Bhagavanritam
Yadaha Bhagavanritam
Brahmane Darshayan Rupam
Brahmane Darshayan Rupam
Avyalika Rataditaha
Avyalika Vataditaha Atma Tattva Vishuddhyartham.
Atma Tattva Vishuddhyartham.
Yadaha Bhagavan Vitam.
Yadaha Bhagavan Vitam.
Vamane Dakshayam Upam.
Brahmane Darshayan Rupam.
Avyalika Vatavitaha.
Avyalika Vratadritaha.
Atma Tattva Vishuddhyartham.
Atma Tattva Vishuddhyartham.
Yadaha Bhagavan Ritam.
Yadaha Bhagavan Vitam.
Brahmane Darshanyan Rupam.
Brahmane Darshayan Rupam.
Avyalikari Ritaha.
Avyalika Vatavitaha.
Atma Tattva Vishuddhyartham.
Atma Tattva Vishuddhyartham.
Yataha Bhagavan Vitam.
Yadaha
Brahmane Darshayan Rupam.
Brahmane Darshayan Rupam.
Avyalika Vratadrita.
Avyalika Vratadritaha.
Atma Tattva, the science of God or that of the living entity.
The science of God or that of the living entity.
Vishuddhi, purification.
Vishuddhi, purification.
Artham, goal.
Artham, goal.
Yat, that which.
Yat, that which.
Aha, said.
Aha, said.
Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead.
Bhagavan, the personality of Godhead.
Ritam, in reality.
Ritam, in reality.
Brahmane, unto Lord Brahma.
Brahmane, unto Lord Brahma.
Darshayan, by showing.
Darshayan, by showing.
Rupam, eternal form.
Rupam, eternal form.
Avyalika, without any deceptive motive.
Avyalika, without any deceptive motive.
Vrata, vow.
Vrata, vow.
Ajritaha, worships.
Ajritaha, worship.
Translation. O King, the personality of Godhead being very much pleased with Lord Brahma because of his non-deceptive penance in Bhakti Yoga, presented his eternal and transcendental form before Brahma. And that is the objective goal for purifying the conditioned soul. By Srila Prabhupada. Atma Tattva is the science of both God and the living entity. Both the Supreme Lord and the living entity are known as Atma. The Supreme Lord is called Paramatma. The living entity, the Atma, the Brahma, or the Jiva. Both the Paramatma and the Jivatma transcendental to the material energy are called Atma. So Shukadev Goswami explains the aim of purifying the truth the aim of purifying the truth of both the Paramatma and the Jivatma. Generally, people have many wrong conceptions about both of them. The wrong conception of the Jivatma is to identify the material body with the pure soul. And the wrong conception of Paramatma is to think him on an equal level with the living entity. But both misconceptions can be removed by one stroke of Bhakti Yoga. Just as in the sunlight, both the sun and the world and everything within the sunlight are properly seen. In the darkness, one cannot see the sun, nor himself, nor the world. But in the sunlight, one can see the sun, himself, and the world around him. Srila Sukadeva Goswami therefore says that for purification of both wrong conceptions, the Lord presented his eternal form before Brahmaji, being fully satisfied by Brahma's non-deceptive vow of discharging Bhakti Yoga. Except for Bhakti Yoga, any method for realization of Atma Tattva, or the science of Atma, will prove deceptive in the long run. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that only by Bhakti Yoga can one know him perfectly. And then one can enter into the science of God. Brahmaji undertook great penance in performing Bhakti Yoga, and thus he was able to see the transcendental form of the Lord. His transcendental form is 100% spiritual, and one can see him only by spiritualized vision after proper discharge of tapasya or penance in pure Bhakti Yoga. The form of the Lord manifested before Brahma is not one of the forms with which we have experience in the material world. Brahmaji did not perform such severe types of penance just to see a form of material production. Therefore, the question by Maharaj Parikshit about the form of the Lord is answered. The form of the Lord is Sat Chid Ananda, or eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss. But the material form of the living entity is neither eternal, nor full of knowledge, nor blissful. That is the distinction between the form of the Lord and that of the conditioned soul. The conditioned soul, however, can regain the form of eternal knowledge and bliss simply by seeing the Lord by means of Bhakti Yoga. The summary is that due to ignorance, the conditioned soul is encaged in the temporary varieties of material forms, but the Supreme Lord has no such temporary form like the conditioned souls. He is always possessed of an eternal form of knowledge and bliss, and that is the difference between the Lord and the living entity. One can understand this difference by the process of Bhakti Yoga. Brahma was then told by the Lord the gist of Srimad Bhagavatam in 4 original verses. Thus, Srimad Bhagavatam is not a creation of mental speculators. The sound of Srimad Bhagavatam is transcendental, and the resonance of Srimad Bhagavatam is as good as that of the Vedas. The topic of the Srimad Bhagavatam is the science of both the Lord and the living entity. Regular reading or hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam is also performance of Bhakti Yoga, and one can attain the highest perfection simply by the association of Srimad Bhagavatam. Both Sukadeva Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit attained perfection through the medium of Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Gyantamirandasya Jananjana Shalakaya Chakshur Unmalitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Well, it's such a rich purport that I was actually feeling challenged. I kind of wanted to stop practically with each sentence and just discuss each sentence. And I appreciate the very last one. Prabhupada is bringing us right into the presence of what we're doing here with Srimad Bhagavatam. So here we are. We get this chance to literally perfect our life, true perfection, eternality, full of bliss and knowledge through this medium of Srimad Bhagavatam. And it is just an unbelievable good fortune, just a tremendously good fortune. In this past week, somehow came into my memory some reading from my youth prior to being aware of Srimad Bhagavatam. And there are some authors of interest from the 18th, or from the 19th and 20th centuries. And they had a lot of interesting ideas, but they did not have complete idea. They did not have complete idea. Their ideas were scratching at the truth. There was truth there. There was a little bit of the truth. There was a little bit of truth. They could get some truth. And some of them were aware of this. And I know a lot of these books are not necessarily studied these days, but back in prior to year 2000, probably a lot of youth being decently educated were reading the classics. But comes to mind an author by the name of Sherwood Anderson, who is alive in the late 1800s, died in the early 1900s. And he wrote a book of vignettes of people's lives called Winesburg, Ohio, was what it was published. But initially it was called the Book of Grotesque. And the concept that he was conveying is that in the world on its own is just full of truth, full of all these truths. And that man, a person as an individual, will take one of these truths and try to make that truth their own and try to live by that truth. In the process of trying to take that truth as their own and separating it from the totality of truth, they made a grotesque out of that truth, and they made an imperfection of that life. So these kinds of ideas are there, but we have the fortune to be able to get the complete science that explains the nature of aspects of reality. And that gives us full knowledge about who we are, who God is, who and what we are in relation to God. And it is necessary to understand this if one is going to have an existence that truly allows one to be well and happy in the ultimate sense. So in this translation, and of course in the previous couple of verses, there was the I believe both of them were bringing up conceptions of I and mine, and that actually relates. You can see in ways Anderson had written, when we take this view of I and mine, that's a separative view, we're automatically creating an incompleteness and a grotesque. When I look at this translation, I'm trying to contemplate what's happening here. Because Lord Brahma is in a very unique position. While it is generally understood that he is a jiva soul, that he is in a position, occupying a position, that he is not necessarily of the God category, of the Vishnu tattva category, but he is actually a jiva soul with a very big service as the first person whose service is the creation of the universe. So I was kind of contemplating who I am as a jiva and who everybody else is as a jiva. And we are, I don't know how many billions, maybe even trillions of years into the current creative process. So we are very far removed from being even the jiva creator of this universe, of which already so much is manifested. So much has been manifested. There's been so many generations, there's so many species of life, so many ecological systems taking place. But Brahmaji is coming into this universe, and not by ordinary sexual reproduction coming out of a womb, but I believe sometimes he's referred to as, also Brahmaji is referred to as Aja, or unborn, because of the nature of his coming into being. So there was, in a sense, no creation as we think of the creation when Brahma was appearing. So what was his service? It wasn't to go out and get a job. He wasn't contemplating his family life at that point. He was coming into his own being, and the service that was given to him by oral, I believe, some type of reception. He heard 2 syllables that indicated to him to perform penance or austerity. And so this is how he engaged. The 2 syllables are not necessarily in the Sanskrit of this verse. I believe that they will come up in later verses. But Prabhupada still introduces the word penance in the translation, even though that word is not exactly showing in the word for word synonyms. So as I'm understanding it, as I'm viewing this, Brahma's service was in receiving that indication, instruction from the Lord to perform penance, to do that. So he performed austerities for a very long time. And Prabhupada is making the point, non-deceptive penance. So in one sense, it was pure. There wasn't anything else going on there. So he was very much engaged in his service for a long period of time. And because of this, the Lord appeared to Brahma. So there's a really clear idea here that by performance of austerity, by making austerity importantly in the mood of service, that this is the result, this is the way to get to see and discover the Lord, by performing austerity by me. So I'm looking at this word penance and how Prabhupada has presented it in terms of being non-deceptive. And I looked up some definitions, or ordinary definitions, dictionary definitions of what is penance. And I was also contemplating this word in relation to austerity, and also I started to, was somehow associating with atonement. So these are distinct words, but they can kind of connect to each other. And so what is the clarity that we're looking for? when I look at the ordinary dictionary definition, I'll have like penance, and I'm reading it, an act of self-mortification or devotion performed voluntarily to show sorrow for a sin or other wrongdoing. Or it can get religiously colored, a sacrament in some churches that includes contrition, confession to a priest, acceptance of punishment, and absolution. And that kind of moves it into the area of atonement. So I did have some wondering, and I'm just sharing my thoughts. Some of what I'm going to be saying, some things I'll be citing scripture, I'll be citing Prabhupada, and there's that, and in other ways I'll just be presenting my thoughts, and at any point somebody an hour later can, comment or chime in with their own thoughts or comments. But I was considering, well, Lord Brahma was not in the spiritual world. He was not in the spiritual world at this point. He's coming to the material world, and he's not necessarily considered to be a liberated soul. His position is actually within the material world. However, in this particular setup here, his service is to create, and Prabhupada explains, that in order to create in the mood of devotional service, he had to perform this service. So why didn't Brahma just sort of, make his appearance and create immediately? That's not the way it happened. So Brahma is coming in the material world and undergoes something along the lines of austerity for purification. And then through that process, the Lord appears before him. And this is pretty big too, because the Lord really, really revealed himself to Brahma once the Lord was pleased by his penance. Brahma, it wasn't just, he got some idea, a little bit of spiritual insight. The Lord really revealed his transcendental form, his Vaikuntha nature, to Lord Brahma. And once Lord Brahma had that, then he was able to move forward and create in devotional service. That was his bhakti yoga then. It's not like the Lord Brahma came and in some contaminated state, tried to figure out, how to do this and work real hard. I got this job to create. He was creating this world in devotional service. And Brahma's devotional service is here. This is what we're experiencing in this world, has that transcendental aspect if we choose to see it in that way. So this idea, in the Veda base, I decided to look around and how does this word pasya appear in the Veda base? And of course, similar to what we've read in Bhagavatam this morning, Prabhupada is saying many important things about tapasya, the importance of tapasya, the essentialness of tapasya. And I was also noting on a morning walk, he also mentioned tapasya in a way where it's not quite right. And you could even say it's out of balance. And Prabhupada was, on the morning walk, said, yes, tapasya. There are many. They are very much addicted to tapasya, shushka tapasya, shushka tapasya. There are many stages unnecessarily starving, fasting, unnecessarily. So I also this past week, the idea of balance has been in my mind a little bit, and it's the importance that things do need to be balanced. Everything needs to be balanced. So it's interesting that and again it's sort of that concept of these particular people that Prabhupada talked about being addicted to tapasya. Again, they took something that's part of the whole truth, the reality of beginning and progressing in Krishna consciousness, and that's the performing of tapasya. But they separated this one aspect from the whole and turned it into a grotesque. Their whole thing is then really almost Hiranyakashipu-like. In fact, really, Hiranyakashipu is a good example of someone who has a goal that is corrupted in their motivation for performing austerity. They get a result. They can get a result depending on desire, but they're not going to get the ultimate result of eternal knowledge, of eternality, full knowledge, and full bliss. So, this idea of balance is very, very important. And I was also considering about achintya beta tattva, that truth about the living entity. And I think it connects a little bit to the verse that we're just studying today. You know, Prabhupada says, Atma Tattva is the science of both God and the living entity. And so, again, when one becomes an extremist or takes a little part of the truth, so the person who thinks, I am God, there's truth to that, according to Chincha Beta Tattva. The Chincha Beta Tattva is taking these two things, the living entity and God, and saying there's a simultaneous and inconceivable oneness and difference. But that difference is very, very important. If you leave that off, you have the incomplete statement of just, I am God. And this is ultimately a very fatal mistake if one's goal is to experience the eternality of full knowledge and blissful love. It's a very, very fatal mistake because it takes away the capacity for relationship. And it doesn't work, and it's proven not to work over and over again. So it produces what? Not sat, eternal. It produces temporary. Someone gets this idea, I am God, and there's some truth there, and they get something from that. But because it's not complete, what happens? They're going to fall away from that. They're going to fall away from it, and who knows where they're going to go from there. So the other part was say, well, I'm just separate. I'm totally separate. I have no connection to God. Well, that certainly defeats the yoga part of bhakti. If we're If there's no union, if there's no oneness at all in the experience, that's kind of ultimately a disaster too. One will actually suffer. If you keep going down that path, it takes you to voidism. So I see Achinchya Beta Beta also as something that's about balance. If you go too much one way, that's a mistake. If you go too much the other way, that's a mistake. So I personally appreciate the idea of balance in spiritual life, and the balance in philosophical points, balance in our life, how we're living in these bodies, how we're managing our time, how we're managing our activities. And so from there, I wanted to talk about the practicality of our lives. Was somebody saying something?
We're good. We're with you.
I guess not. Okay. So yeah, I've really appreciated in recent times listening to other persons leading the discussions and just questions and people, other assembled devotees had afterwards, and talking about their lives and different challenges they're facing. And I've really been meditating. It's a big part of my life to very much look at lifestyle. How do we incorporate all these philosophical points? How do we incorporate this into the practicality of our life? And I was connecting this to, just in my own mind, thoughts of other verses were coming to mind. From like Sri Ushopanishad, for example, in the I believe it's the first and second mantras. It's presented how the Lord is the owner and controller of everything, how things belong to the Lord. And when we have that understanding that we're not the owner and controller of everything, that when we learn to work in this world with that understanding, then even to desire to live for a long time, that's okay, because at that point we're not working. Prabhupada in this translation is actually saying like, there's no karma. That means it's transcendental. If there's no karma, that means it's transcendental. Is this right, dear Govinda Prabhu?
No karma, akarma. Yeah, that's the transcendental platform of activity. Bhagavad Gita, 4th chapter. Hare Krishna.
So, and then these thoughts were coming to me as I was walking in the woods. And then it was also in Alachua. I'm not sure where everybody is, but in Alachua, we're in the early stages of spring. And I started thinking about, spring. Yeah, Krishna Bhagavad Gita, 10th chapter. He's presenting all these ways to Arjuna of thinking or seeing him in the world. And so that's very practical. And in doing that in the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, I don't see that Krishna is himself limiting to some impersonal idea. He's definitely not saying, I'm not the supreme personality of Godhead, Lord and Master of the Gopis, or all these different things. But I think he's being very practical, that for most living entities, for most people, even hearing Bhagavad Gita, for many people even identifying as devotees, we're at a stage where we're not really seeing Krishna face to face. I'm speaking I statements. I'm not personally in the rasa dance. And I have this body and I have these senses. And these are things that I can relate to, I know what a shark is. I know what the different seasons, different months in the calendar are, what the different seasons are, spring. I understand what a banyan tree is. So these are things that we do have experience of, that we can have any various appreciations of these things. In other words, that we can relate to them and get some sense of the glories of God. And in doing that, there can be a bit of it could be somewhat impersonal, like you could just appreciate those things. They are a spark of Krishna's splendor. And hey, Krishna's pretty great. Even a spark of Krishna's splendor is that amazing. So amazing. And so that appreciation can be there. But I think it's not limited to that. There actually is the personality of Godhead, who's this is all coming from. And so I think it's important, when we engage with this world, when we see this world, whatever we're experiencing, that we actually try to personalize it, that we actually try to really connect it to Krishna in relationship. And by that, I mean to say, like, let's say there's a painting that some artist has done, or there's a beautiful house that someone has, they have just a very, very beautiful home. And let's just say they're not there. Let's say they're not there. Let's just say you come across this beautiful painting and you can just appreciate that painting, like, wow, this artwork is really beautiful. You can even analyze it, or maybe you don't analyze it. Maybe you just get the experience of it. But however you're experiencing it, and it's a beautiful home, you can just step into it. It can be very clean, very uplifting, very pleasing in very many conscious and unconscious ways. You're experiencing this positive experience from it. But there's more to it. There's actually a person who painted that painting, or the person who that home is their abode. And wow, actually those things are just a kind of reflection of them. It's an extension of who they are. You get to some idea of that person, but you don't get the fullness of that person. So I feel my interest is to go farther. My interest is to go farther. So I am definitely trying in my life, when I see that beautiful azalea flowers, or the Chickasaw plums that are starting to blaze white, and the bees, it's so beautiful. It could almost be beautiful enough in itself, because again, the spark of Krishna's splendor is so amazing. But I'm really wanting to approach loving God. So I really want how to not try to put myself in the position of the enjoyer, but rather the appreciator with gratitude. And how do I want to share these things by serving Krishna? How do I offer a flower to Krishna? How do I enhance the Dham for Krishna's pleasure? And how do I create an energy with my service that when other people partake of those things, that they will actually start to feel purified. They will actually begin to feel attracted to Krishna, to Krishna as a person, to get to know this personality of Krishna. And so I've been contemplating how difficult it is in this world, how challenging it is being in the modern world of Kali Yuga, right? There's a lot of causes of disturbance, and the systems in which we are growing up, and here I'm kind of speaking as a modern American, a modern person in the world. We're not growing up, most of us. There may be some nice second generation devotees, I don't know, but I'm speaking in general about the modern world. These are not times where we're on some Bhakti Siddha planet where the environment is very pure and people are naturally flowing in devotional service and respecting nature, and you're not even checking your iPhone to see if it's time to chant Gayatri, but just you're so tapped into the natural flow that if you look up, you'll notice the sun's right at its zenith. So actually, a lot of it is we're overwhelmed by emails. The car needs to go into the shop. If we're going to try to get it all done, there's no limit to it. There's no limit to it. It's going to be very, very difficult. So I've been thinking, what is the escape hatch? For me, I'm thinking a little bit, what is the escape hatch? And I'm kind of lucky in a lot of ways, but I'm still feeling challenged. And what's been coming to me is Tulasi Devi, Vrinda Devi. I'm speaking a little bit personally now, but at the same time, I searched the database for Vrinda Devi. Turned up. Actually, almost nothing. Prabhupada mentioned a purport. He referenced Dagya Madhava, a book written by Rupa Goswami, and there's a quote from Sri Vrinda Devi in there. What Prabhupada does mention a lot in his letters and conversations and books, what he instituted in his temples, Tulsi Puja, is the tremendous importance of Tulsi. And Tulsi is a partial expansion of Vrinda Devi. And Vrinda Devi is a partial expansion, of Radharani. And as I'm trying to do my best to serve what I feel is something I've been called to do in service to Srila Prabhupada, and that's try to create sort of the simple living, high thinking, having land, trying to create a natural lifestyle, trying to create a spiritual community. It's really, really challenging. It's very, very challenging. Because again, we're growing up, at least I'm growing up in a society where a lot of people don't even see sunlight, much less grow their own food. It's really, really, really crazy like that. But what is, and you know, you can get really lost in all the things like, you know, getting land and gardening and this method and that method and all this stuff. And that's great. You know, you may even achieve growing your own food, and it could actually take a lot of time. It might actually be simpler to go to the store and have more time to chant Hare Krishna. But what is a really important thing that Prabhupada talked about, brought up extensively and put a lot of importance on? That's Tulasi Devi. And it's already after 9, and I had a lot of really beautiful things that I had been doing research about Tulasi Devi and the Devi. But I will tell you, at New Raman Reti, if you're not aware, at New Raman Reti in the eco village there is a very, very beautiful Vrinda Devi temple. It's a small little temple, very artistic, beautiful. It's made of cob and forms and stained glass windows. And there is a Vrinda Devi deity in there. And also the verses of the Sri Vrinda Devi Astakam are in there. And it's extraordinary. It's really extraordinarily beautiful. But Srila Prabhupada, you know, talked extensively about the mercy that one gets from serving Tulasi Devi, and it's very, very, very important. So I have, Jim Wood visited that little temple last month. Nice. And so I know myself, I feel like I'm getting ready to take a commitment to prioritize the worship of Tulasi Devi, Vrinda Devi. And, you know, even you know, you want to prepare really to, first of all, please Krishna, because actual prasadam is you're cooking for Krishna, you're cooking for the pleasure of yeah, you're cooking for the pleasure of Krishna. You're not even cooking, much less cooking for yourself. You're not even really cooking for your guests first and foremost. You're really cooking for Krishna. You're really, and then when you share that mercy, you're actually, it's a beautiful way of sharing mercy, of giving blessing, of giving purification to people. And so, Prabhupada, you know, made that point, and I haven't been doing it. I don't have that standard. I haven't had that standard, but like, you know, you should have at least one Tulsi leaf on the offering plate. So to those of you who are in Alachua or in parts of the world where it's possible, there's probably no good excuse. I'll just put that out there for not having Tulsi, especially if you're in Alachua. Very conducive to this environment. And so I'm going to say anybody who does have Tulsi, and you definitely have real Tulsi and not some imposter basil. I've heard that those are around. I would be very, very grateful if you would let me know. I will do anything to get some help as yours. And I know that that's where the sort of where I'm going to be letting go of other things to prioritize. I do want to mention one last little thing. I have a friend who is a scholar. He's a disciple of Prabhupada and has done a lot of really wonderful translations, things in glorification, glorifying Prabhupada, but also books that are in our line. And I asked him last night, are you familiar with Rupa Goswami, the Dagda Madhava? Is Sri Vrenda Devi therein the forest goddess? And he replied, yes, she is Vana Devi in all of the Leela books by the Goswamis. He said, I think there are Tulsi Devi books, but not Vrenda Devi. And he's got a 25-year-old file of things that he's been compiling that I want to get hold of before he's left his body and see what might be there. I will end my piece there, and I stand before you ready to be corrected. Anybody have any strong criticisms of what I said today? Or any questions or comments, thoughts?
Thank you, Gajendra Prabhu. Hare Krishna. It's gone away. Krishna Krishna Hare Hare Vrindaya Tulasi Devai Priyaya Kesavasi Cha Krishna Bhakti Padi Devi Satyavacham. I criticize you for saying that I have no good excuse. Now, I appreciate very much your emphasis there on Srimati Tulasi Devi, because I know in my whatever, if I'm giving class, it's such an important aspect of bhakti that I don't emphasize or hardly even mention. So it is such a cornerstone of the process of bhakti that Prabhupada gave us. So I appreciate that you're bringing that into our Sangha. And I appreciated early in your class that, the idea of balance and completeness and the fortune and grace we have to be exposed to whatever understanding we have to be exposed to this Achintya Beta Tattva as a complete integrated understanding. And without that, because I like where you went with the grotesque, because we can look at different philosophies as you did in your class, and we can see where some, they've got truth and they're overemphasizing the oneness part, or they've got truth and they're overemphasizing the difference part. And it can just be like an abstract philosophical analysis, but actually the overemphasis, the imbalance, it often, if not practically always, it manifests in a grotesque, painful way. And that stunts our spiritual growth, or just creates havoc in this world. So so those are just some reflections that are happening for me in relation to aspects of where you touched on in your class. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And I appreciate what you opened with, because I got a text from Krishna saying that, I was wrong in your case, but about Tulsi. No, I definitely was not meaning to try to put anything on someone like I'm in a position like, this is what you got to do. And I really didn't mean it in that way. It was what you indicated, is I'm trying to bring the importance to something and really try to encourage and maybe be a little provocative in the matter, just to be a little more conscious of this. So I didn't mean to present it in a wrong way.
Yeah, that's the spirit in which I received it. Yeah. So so it was in a very healthy, enlivening, even slightly edgy, humorous way. It was challenging in a good way. And
I'm really feeling it's important. I mean, that's just what's been coming to me. And at the very least, speaking for myself, I know it's really important to me. And I don't want to talk too much about myself, but it's been something growing over the past, I'd say slowly over the past few years. I'm very slow, but I realized it actually started growing when it hit me 3 years ago. I suddenly had an epiphany about when I pledged my life to Srila Prabhupada. And I had the realization that my commitment, my vows were not necessarily at the formal fire yajna initiation ceremony. Not to minimize that, but I was alone, and except I wasn't alone. I was surrounded by Tulasi Devi, and it was really, really powerful. And I realized as I lived my life that most of my healthy thought, most of my function, most of my joy and happiness and inspiration comes in relation to being in the forest and working to try to beautify. So it's a very personal thing for me, and that I'm not putting on others, but I do hold really strongly to Srila Prabhupada. So I do hope to bring Tulsi Devi to a Alachua Forest Sanctuary and make her knowledge of her and her position and really serve under her. I really see her as having an important role in serving Sri Radha Ramana Hari and serving, Srila Prabhupada by helping people purify and present Krishna consciousness, advance not just the material mode of goodness, but to really try to find pure devotional service. Any other thoughts, questions, comments? Anything anybody like to share?
Hare Krishna. I also appreciate you connecting Achinta Veda Veda Tattva with balance. I like seeing it in this way, and I wonder if you can say more about what Prabhupada shares, if he shares, about how come worship of Tulsi Devi is so important.
Yeah, I was looking at this, and again, I referenced the database, and mainly what I got is he made it very, very important. And the reason he made it important is that serving Tulsi Devi would just bring us mercy, benediction. I don't find that anywhere where Prabhupada really was getting too deep or esoteric, no more than, I don't know. I just had the sense like any more than, he's going to get into other really intimate. What my devotee friend indicated to me, last night is that there is a lot of depth and intimacy regarding understanding who Vrinda Devi, Tulsi Devi are, and she's very, very, very important in the pastimes of Radha Krishna. She is, I mean, Vrindavan. I mean, it's Krishna's most sacred, most intimate abode, whether Gokul or Goloka, is called Vrindavan, literally the forest of Vrinda. And she is the one who is primarily tasked with making all the arrangements for the intimate meetings of Radha and Krishna. in terms of their environment. So she's a very, very, very important. But mainly what Prabhupada, he didn't. I'm not finding where he said a lot about that, but other than he has referenced particular books or verses or the writings of the Goswamis, where I believe a lot of it can be found. And I don't know that I'm qualified to go there. I'm still trying to, get some of the basics. But I think it's good to know about it. Prabhupada doesn't want us to try to jump up to the platform of being gopis in the rasa dance, but he still lets us know about the rasa lila and says that even getting that awareness can be purifying. So to short answer your question, he just made it important for receiving the mercy to be able to perform pure devotional service.
I appreciate your response, and Bhakti Eze, your question, and I appreciate the simplicity of response that the Prabhupada emphasized. We worship, circumambulate, serve Tulasi Devi, and we get grace, we get mercy. And then, and Prabhupada made it a part of the daily morning program. He made it part of it, in most times over the 10, 11 years, we've not had Tulasi as part of our program, but Prabhupada did make it. And like a place to go, I would say, for Bhakti Eze or any of us here, is because as part of Tulasi service, he gave us three songs, three mantras. And so to just read the translations, of those three, the first one, Vrindaye Tulasi Devi Priya Kesavasi Chad, the second one, the bhajan itself, Tulasi Krishna Prayasi Namo Namah, then the last one, Yani Kani Chapapani Brahma Hachari Kani Chap. Just to read the translations, and they're simple, at the same time they open the door to the esoteric meaning. So I would recommend read or even memorize the Sanskrit and the translations of those three songs that Prabhupada, just like he gave us Sri Guru Charana Padma, Jaya Radha Madhava, Samsaradava, Nrsingadev prayers, he gave us those three songs glorifying Tulasi Devi. Read the translations and it opens the door to those esoteric places, as Gajendra Prabhu emphasized. Not that we want to not that we want to do a spiritual bypass. At the same time, we get purified by hearing the Sanskrit, reading the translations.
Hare Krishna, thank you.
Yeah, dear Govinda Prabhu, I appreciate your mentioning that, and I actually had some idea. I kind of like had it available and in my notes to share those, and it is interestingly, the Sri Vrindadevi Astakam was written by Vishwanath Chakravarti, who the Samsara Dava is really similar. It's interesting because in Samsara Dava, he has a Charanagvindam, and he does the same thing with Tulsi Devi. But I noticed there's that type sort of whole approach in the prayers that Prabhupada gave us, like the Yani Kani Chapapani. So like, well, here you're appealing to somebody who might have killed the Brahmana. This is like a pretty sinful person. Wow. Okay. Well, so for you, it's pretty good if you've killed a Brahmana recently, because assuming you're maybe not worshiping Tulsi on the strength of being able to kill Brahmins, you can kind of counteract that sin. In other words, you killed a Brahmin and that could really obstruct your path. But Tulsi Devi is so powerful by circumambulating her, and sincerely, that's not going to be a problem on your path. You may need to apologize to somebody's family, but you're gonna advance. That impediment will be removed. And as the other prayers that dear Govinda mentioned, and maybe I'll share these, it would be too much to get into them all. Maybe I'll find it, you can find it yourselves, but it's, yeah, all the way to serving Radha and Krishna with prema, pure love. Like, hard to really conceive what's at store. I'm sorry, it looks like Malini is speaking and I'm not hearing.
Malini, did you want to express something? You're on mute. She's smiling. Okay.
I was, Laura was very curious about those songs, so I was reciting the English of the prayer to Tulasi to hear.
Well, can we hear a little bit? Your lips moving are amazing, but I don't have that lip reading skill. Can we hear a little bit?
Oh, Tulasi, beloved of Krishna, bow down before you again and again. My desire is to obtain the service of Radha and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you as his wish is fulfilled, bestowing your mercy on him, you make him a resident of Vrindavan. My desire is to also, that you also grant me a residence in the pleasure grove of Sri Vrindavan Dham. Thus, within my vision, I will always behold the beautiful pastime of Radha and Krishna. I beg you to make me a follower of the coward damsel of Raj. Please give me the privilege of your devotional service and make me your own mere servant. This very lonely and fallen servant of Krishna prays. May I always swim in the love of Shri Shri Radha and Govinda.
Beautiful, thank you. Wow.
Hare Krishna. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
we are hearing you. Yes.
Yeah, I just want to share about, you know, the with Tulsi Devi, you know, first of all, I don't have any, it's a challenge for me. It's such a simple process. Like when Margari the hunter, like his process was to just worship Tulsi Devi, and it seems like so simple and so beautiful and so like fulfilling, and like what, like that's all you need to chant Hare Krishna and worship Tulsi Devi, and like, and that's it. And that's like, there's something so appealing about that. It's so beautiful. And at the same time, like for me to keep a plant alive is like an impossible thing. I couldn't imagine how to keep a plant alive. You know, I can keep kids alive. I know how to keep kids alive, or even animals. I don't really want to do animals, but you know, like a plant is just like impossible. But there's something so appealing about that. And I know that whenever I first was introduced to Krishna consciousness, I was like, you know, what's this? Why is this plant on this altar? You know, it's kind of like, what's happening here? And actually, the person who was sharing it with me was like really glorifying, like, look, like a salesperson almost, like, look, Krishna consciousness has everything. You know, if you like God, like you like a man God, then we have man God. If you're into the goddess, we have goddess. You know, if you're into, you know, oneness, everything is, you know, the bright light, that's there too. If you worship nature, look, we have a plant. If you like to worship nature, here's a plant here. You know, whatever you want, you know, Krishna consciousness has it. So that's what I really appreciate Tulsi Devi's like bringing. Of course, she's a pure devotee, not necessarily a plant like we think of, but still it's in the form of what we see as of like a natural growing thing, a plant like that. It just kind of gives this Krishna consciousness has everything, you know, it's amazing.
Yeah, you know, the way I kind of understand Tulsi Devi is a little bit how like I understand the deities. Like, I'm not qualified to, in my present state, in my present condition, to behold the pastimes of Radha Krishna in a real present real-time way involved in their Leela. However, with the eyes that I have, which are very conditioned by this world and these dimensions, I do have Radha Krishna deities, and I'm able to behold them and serve them and develop. So yeah, Tulsi Devi is an expansion of Vrinda Devi, and it's a way of being able to serve Vrinda Devi from our present state. And it really ties us into worshiping, cooperating with her in worshiping Krishna when we offer those Tulsi leaves. But it is, like so many things, it's not ultimately the external, and we are limited beings. But I think Parampara Prabhu, just that you have that appreciation, that desire that you can read and hear the story of Magari and appreciate it, that's so important. And just being present with what we can do now. I will say it was interesting when I was reading a lot of the letters that Prabhupada was writing when he talked about Tulsi, and how pleased he was when Tulsi was getting established. And he did say, in several different places I saw, he simplified it. Like he was saying to one person, like, about the sprays and stuff like that, you just water Tulsi and, keep her clean. That's the process. You just water Tulsi. The catch is with love and devotion. It's not a, it's just not a physical material process. Like Tulsi Devi is spray her with this insecticide, this and that, do that, add this chemical mix of fertilizer. I think Prabhupada was really indicating that there is a transcendence to it. When we come into a place in our life where we're perhaps really ready, or maybe we're ready, but we're called to other service. I don't want to go there, but it's about love and devotion. It's about love and devotion, and it is simple. So I think what you said is really interesting, Parampara. We make things complicated. Our material conditioning makes things very, very complicated, right? Prabhupada talks about that even with chanting Hare Krishna. It's so simple, he says. Like it's an easy process, right? You just chant Hare Krishna. It's so simple. Ugh.
Ramachandra Prabhu wrote, taking care of Tulsi in Montreal and growing her from a small creeper saved my devotional creeper. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. All right. I think we're good. Thank you, dear Govinda Prabhu, for allowing me the chance to. I've been kind of terrified the past couple of weeks. I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you very much. I hope everyone has a very wonderful day. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Bye.
Prabhupada ki jai.
Bye.
Tulasi Devi ki jai. Hare Krishna.
Bye.